striking New York.
We could have prevented the job loss and the death and the sickness and disease around the world had China not lied.
How did we get here?
This decision will go down as the most consequential and the most dangerous mistake in history.
Be careful raising a baby tiger, because one day it will grow up and eat you.
What's the cure for the CCP virus?
They report that the illegal lab was run by Prestige Biotech, a Chinese company registered in Nevada. The company's president is Xiuqin Yao. NBC reported that all biological agents were destroyed by July 7th. Hong Kong activists are hoping for free elections. The committee shared its mission in Washington, D.C. last week. It's looking to establish a political body free from the manipulation of the Chinese Communist Party and give Hong Kong citizens a way to vote without fear. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg reports.
That's not going to happen.
The goal of the Hong Kong Parliament Electoral Organizing Committee is to hold safe, credible elections internationally. Elections guaranteed to be free of the Chinese Communist Party's control.
Hong Kong is like a police state, and the national security law is like martial law in Hong Kong. But people don't relate to that. So, in fact, we lost all our freedom, rule of law, and democracy. So we need to do something.
The idea is inspired by the Tibetan Parliament in exile. Elmer Yuen, the initiator of the committee, says according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Hong Kongers have the right to vote for their own government to determine their own future. He says now all branches of Hong Kong's government, including the district council, is being totally manipulated by Beijing.
They are afraid of competition for control of China and its people. So we want to do is we want to wrestle the power to the people, not by the elite or not by the Communist Party members.
UN says the U.S. needs to make a choice about Hong Kong.
We need to get rid of the Communist Party once and for all, at all price, because it's not only the Hong Kong people or the Chinese people. The whole world is affected. Look at COVID. It's horrible. And look at the fentanyl here. It's killing so many people. They must make up their mind and do away with CCP once and for all.
Election regulations are set to be established next month. The committee has asked all Hong Kong elected representatives who held office before July 2020 to participate in the upcoming parliament election slated for later this year. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Japanese restaurants in Beijing are bearing the brunt as China controls on Japanese food imports. Some owners are reporting numbers down by up to 90%. Hunt for the malicious software. To dig deeper, I spoke with geopolitical analyst and author of Winning Space: How America Remains a Superpower. Brandon Weichert, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Brandon, what could this reported malware give China the ability to do?
Well, basically, they are probing our critical infrastructure, and it will give them the ability to lace that critical infrastructure networks with electronic time bombs, basically, which basically allows for them to detonate those electronic time bombs at a moment of their choosing.
And what would the detonation of those bombs be, so to speak?
Well, it's basically going to be knocking out our critical infrastructure like water treatment facilities, electrical grid, things like that. And the objective would be to sow as much chaos here at home so that we can't focus on deploying resources to stop what I think is a likely, very soon, invasion of Taiwan.
And how widespread is this malware in our country?
It's systemic. We learned from the Typhoon Vault operation that China was doing, basically that they had complete access to our critical infrastructure networks for a very long time, and we are now having to go through and basically mop up all of the damage they did and hopefully catch all those electronic time bombs before they go off. And I don't know if we can. It's a lot of time they had in those networks.
And what does the presence of this reported malware mean about the Chinese Communist Party's intentions overall?
Basically, I think this is the prelude to a cyber Pearl Harbor. I think that this is part of a larger Chinese military operation to knock the United States out before the Chinese decide to go into Taiwan. I would next be watching for our satellites. I think we might be in store for a space Pearl Harbor, and I'd keep an eye out on any more biolabs that we discover operating illegally in our own country, as we did over the weekend.
And they have a massive hacking operation, right?
It's the world's largest, and it's dedicated solely to going after the United States, whereas we have to worry about Russia, North Korea, Iran, Al-Qaeda, and all the other threats. China just focuses primarily on the United States, and it's showing that that is really having a positive impact for them, and it's doing a lot of damage to us.
That is shocking. Now, at least we have an investigation into this malware. Do we know anything about the progress of these investigations?
No, it's going. It's just getting going. Again, we're playing catch up. That's not a good place to be when we're talking in the cyber domain. Cyber, like space, those are two domains where speed kills, and the Chinese have a lot of lead time on us, and that's not good. We're having to basically go back and hope and go through every single system we have and hope we can find these things that they planted. But the Chinese had a lot of time in there without us knowing about it.
And is there anything we can do proactively to defend against this sort of attack, these sort of malware code going forward?
Well, the first thing that the administration should do, and they've indicated this already, I don't think they've done it explicitly enough, is to basically say any kind of infrastructure cyber attack will be a full declaration of war on the United States, and it will necessitate a response militarily from us, not just in the cyber domain. Another thing we could do is everything they do to us, penetrating our critical infrastructure, lacing it possibly with electronic time bombs, we should do the same thing to them. And make it very clear that if you're going to do it to us, we're going to do it to you.
Geopolitical analyst Brandon Weichert, thank you.
Thank you.
I lost that mic already. The mic fell down into my...
We meet again about it.
If you want to know specifically what I would do with the CIA,
Yeah, I'd love to know.
the dangerous part of the CIA is the plans division, controlling the media, doing all this mischief and monkey business around the world.
You know all the stuff with the CIA and his computer. Hold on a second.
Decade and beyond that. So that's where I'm coming from.
All right, thank you very much, Don. Thank you. Cash-strapped U.S. trucking company Yellow Corporation has ceased operations and is filing for bankruptcy. This after failing to reorganize and refinance over $1 billion in debt. The move means 30,000 people are at risk of losing their jobs. Yellow voted a threatened strike by 22,000 Teamsters represented workers earlier this month. The company has 12,000 trucks. Its customers include large retailers like Walmart and Home Depot. Part of the company's debt is a $700 million pandemic relief loan provided in 2020 in exchange for a 30% stake in the Tennessee-based company. We have footage of a dramatic rescue in Texas. Check out this video of police officers pulling a man from a burning car. Police in White Settlement, Texas responded to a report of a car hitting a pole early Saturday morning. Responding officers found 2 people in the car. The driver was able to get out safely, but the male passenger was unconscious and unable to get out. Officers quickly pulled the man from the burning car. The driver and passengers were taken to a hospital and are expected to survive. The cause of the crash is still under investigation. And if you have any news tips or feedback for the show,
that meets criticism from climate campaigners. Also tonight, a British pensioner has been released from prison in Cyprus immediately after he was sentenced for killing his wife in an assisted suicide. A powerful group of West African states is threatening Niger's coup leaders with force if the democratically elected president is not reinstated. And the progressive Ukraine's counter-offensive is hampered by one major obstacle: landmines. Rishi Sunak defended the decision to grant hundreds of new oil and gas drilling licenses in the North Sea. He says the move is entirely consistent with the UK's net zero commitments and will help ensure Britain is energy independent. Climate campaigners, however, have called the move wrong-headed. More on this from NTD's Malcolm Hudson.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced on Monday the government is granting hundreds of new oil and gas licenses in the North Sea. He says this will help make Britain more energy independent. But his announcement was criticised by climate campaigners, who say the UK is looking hypocritical after hosting the COP26 climate summit. Sunak confirmed plans for at least 100 licenses to be issued this autumn, which attracted bids earlier this year. And hundreds of future licenses could also be granted. But climate campaigners have criticised the move. Jess Ralston, head of energy for the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit, said the UK's position as climate leader is threatened by Sunak's announcement.
We've hosted COP26 and we're always calling on other countries to do more on climate change. So it could look quite hypocritical if we're calling on others to reduce their oil and gas use and reduce their demand, but at the same time we're approving more.
Oxfam's climate change policy advisor said the new licenses will be a wrecking ball on the UK's climate commitments. Sunak, meanwhile, said the new oil and gas licenses are entirely consistent with the UK's net zero commitments because oil and gas are still expected to provide 25% of the UK's energy needs in 2050. He said it's better to have homegrown energy than relying on foreign dictators for fuel. Sunak also confirmed 2 carbon capture and storage projects. The government is providing up to £20 billion of funding for the early deployment of such schemes. Sunak said this was new technology that Britain can lead the world in. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London. Net zero commitments, they'll still be using oil and gas by the year 2050, and so they want to have their own homegrown supply. The reason for this is mainly because it'll be somewhat cheaper in the future, and it'll also allow them not to be influenced or controlled by foreign hostile states, like, say, for example, Russia.
And what's Labour's take on this new development?
So Labour's taking quite a staunch approach. They're going in the opposite direction from the Conservatives. They've said that they won't be giving out new licenses. So we could probably see this this distinction between Labour and the Conservatives getting wider as we get closer to the election, because the Conservatives are opening up the licensing.
How can we expect this to influence the prices?
Immediately, we won't see any changes to the price of oil and gas. This is because the oil and gas industry is actually quite a slow-moving industry. First, they have to do the exploration, then they have to actually drill, and then they have to extract the oil and process it before finally selling it onto the consumer. So this process takes many, many years. So we won't see an immediate drop in price, but in the years to come, we'll likely see the effect of this, and it may well impact us positively.
It seems the Prime Minister has maybe changed.
Testimony is about the Biden family, Hunter Biden's business dealings, and the alleged role of President Biden in his son's business affairs. Congressman Matt Gaetz said if Archer is not in the witness chair on Monday, he'll put the U.S. Attorney General in that chair. The U.S. Attorney's Office said in a letter that Archer is not expected to surrender before his congressional testimony. Archer's lawyer also said he did not think the Justice Department was attempting to intimidate his client, and that Archer plans to give his testimony as scheduled. The Sound of Freedom movie continues its run at the box office. The anti-child trafficking movie is getting more theater screenings and beating several big-budget summer blockbusters. The latest numbers say the movie has grown to playing on over 4,000 screens, and that earnings surpass $140 million. That's since the movie's release over 4th of July weekend. It's based on the true story of a former government agent and focuses on the exploitation of children by sex traffickers. With a budget of $14.6 million, Sound of Freedom has become a massively profitable movie for Angel Studios. It will start international screenings in August. Viewers have found the film's depiction of child trafficking eye-opening. Former President Donald Trump gave his support to Sound of Freedom in a campaign video. Promised to subject human traffickers to the death penalty if he's reelected in 2024. A new interview on a California child trafficking bill. An activist explains why he thinks the State Assembly Committee killed the bill. It was designed to strengthen penalties for child sex traffickers.
And this bill is about protecting children. That's all this bill was about. And some people made it about political arguments and culture wars.
Shane Harris is a child safety advocate and the founder of San Diego-based People's Association of Justice. He recently sat down with the Epoch Times for an episode of California Insider. They discussed California Senate Bill 14, which was introduced by Republican State Senator Shannon Grove. The bill was designed to strengthen penalties for repeat offenders related to child sex trafficking. The bill easily passed in the state Senate, but was later killed by the Assembly's Public Safety Committee in July.
I've been a Democrat since I was 18, but I said, look, this is shameful. My party should be standing with the kids. My party should be standing with the majority of people who believe that this is a serious felony.
Harris said the unintended consequences of partisan politics are to blame, that the bill failed to pass the committee.
Their intention was to try to curb Shannon Grove's bill because she's a Republican. And the unintended consequences from that is that you end up protecting this guy who is the criminal, who is hurting more children because you're playing partisanship on an issue that is not partisan and not political.
After the Assembly killed the bill, constituents expressed outrage and disbelief.
There you go.
Many
Democrats
voiced their
have
displeasure on
voted
social media
against
and
it.
with messages and phone calls to their representatives. On July 12th, Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom weighed in on the matter, publicly calling for the bill to be revived. At a second hearing that later followed, almost all Democratic members switched their vote to aye. This allowed the bill to pass onto the Assembly's Appropriations Committee for review.
It shows the power of the people, and it shows the power of bipartisanship. When we put partisanship aside and say what is logical, what is reasonable, what is rational, not what do you like Trump or do you hate Trump? Are you for this or are you for that?
Critics of the bill suggest that lengthy jail sentences are ineffective and that victims could be caught up in the enhanced penalties because many are forced to participate in illegal trafficking activities by their perpetrators. But others say the bill is narrow enough to target only those that are repeatedly caught trafficking children.
We're talking about repeat offenders who continue to traffic and sell our children, and we have to send a message to them that our children are not for sale. If you sell our children, you will pay the highest criminal penalties of our state.
Harris says he remains dedicated to protecting children and supporting the bill as it winds its way through the legislature.
When we come back, Supreme Court Justice...
If you want to take a look at impeachment number one, it was based upon a phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine, talking about potential issues of corruption around Burisma concerning Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. What have we learned? That it's all true. That there was political corruption between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and Burisma in Ukraine. The Biden family was paid. Joe Biden used his office to get the prosecutor looking into Burisma fired. So the fact that Nancy Pelosi led a fast impeachment with no evidence, all based upon a phone call, and by the way, the transcript was released, and that's all that occurred. There was no public corruption, but congressional Democrats voted for it anyway. It was pure politics. There was no base.
I want to ask you about your investigation, but first, let me get to this breaking news. I have in my hand a letter from the Department of Justice that was sent to the Southern District of New York on Saturday. By the way, Devon Archer is testifying on Monday. Do you usually see the DOJ send letters like this out on a Saturday?
Never. This is the first time I've ever heard of the Department of Justice doing anything on a Saturday.
So what is this letter? Can you walk us through it? The government is apprising the court of the status of Devon Archer's appeal of his judgment of conviction, and they request that the court set a surrender date for the defendant to report to a facility. Please walk us through what this letter says.
Yeah, the letter from the Department of Justice is trying to nudge the judge to go ahead and sentence Devon Archer for something unrelated to what we're going to be talking to him about tomorrow. It's odd that it was issued on a Saturday, and it's odd that it's right before he's scheduled to come in to have an opportunity to speak in front of the House Oversight Committee and tell the American people the truth about what really went on with Burisma. So, I don't know if this is a coincidence, Maria, or if this is another example of the weaponization of the Department of Justice, but I can tell you this, the lengths to which the Biden legal team has gone to try to intimidate our witnesses, to coordinate with the Department of Justice, and to certainly coordinate with the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee to encourage people not to cooperate with our investigation, to encourage banks not to turn over bank records, to encourage Treasury not to let us have access to those suspicious activity reports. It's very troubling, and I believe that this is another violation of the law. This is obstruction of justice, but nevertheless, we're going to continue to
significantly behind President Trump, but also behind Ron DeSantis. But he's inching closer to DeSantis, who is at 16% in both polls.
And what message is Tim Scott campaigning on?
Well, he's always campaigned on the same message as he did when he ran for senator about how, the narrative that minorities can't succeed in the United States in today's world is inaccurate, and he's living proof of that. He's very outspoken about how he grew up in South Carolina and the influence that his grandfather had. I think he had a great quote from the speech on Saturday. He said his grandfather, after his parents got divorced and he moved into his grandfather's house, I think he was 7 or 8 years old, and his grandfather said, "You can be bitter or you can be better." That is a microcosm of what Tim Scott is running his campaign on as far as the positive message.
And it sounds like that message is resonating in Iowa. So what's the significance of the Iowa caucus for the Scott campaign?
Well, that's interesting, and I know you know this about how back, I think it was January, the Democratic National Committee voted to remove Iowa and New Hampshire as first in the nation status, but Iowa and New Hampshire refused because it's the state laws that determine that as far as when the primaries are held. Iowa, the caucus, and New Hampshire, the primary. So Iowa is still important, and you can see that all 13, I can't remember whether it was 13 or 14 candidates were there on Saturday, and Tim Scott, his PAC is putting a lot of money into promoting him in Iowa.
And Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is facing pushback for his state's social studies curriculum on slavery. Tell us about that and Tim Scott's response.
Well, that's been in the news lately about the social studies curriculum, and there's a lot of debate on what that means. Democrats have said that it speaks volumes about negative comments about that slavery shouldn't be taught. Ron DeSantis has a different view of that, and Tim Scott over the weekend said that there's no silver lining in slavery. So he's spoken out about a few things related to Ron DeSantis, and that's interesting because he's inching closer to him in the polls in Iowa.
Epoch Times reporter Jeff Louderback, thank you.
Thank you.